You have been working hard. You have tried the visualizations, the vision boards, the scripting, the hustle lists, and still the thing you wanted most sits like a distant shoreline you keep rowing toward without ever touching. Here is the paradox that flips that familiar frustration. Manifestation works backward. It is not a line of cause then effect. It is a signal sent from the end back to the beginning. Think of the mirror first. What you believe about your face determines the angle you approach the mirror, not the other way around. Stay with me until the end, and if this feels like what you've been missing, subscribe so you don't miss the guided practices that follow. You want proof. Fair. Start with the simple image, a river. Most of us imagine change as walking upstream. Act, push, adjust the current, and the shore will change. But what if the current is not changed by how hard you row, but by where the river is rooted? If the river's source shifts its weight, its temperature, its volume, its direction, the current at your feet will reverse. In the language this community borrows, identity precedes timeline. Your internal state, your felt sense of who you are, pulls events to it like a magnetic field. This is not a promise that bypasses effort, nor a magical guarantee. It is a reframing designed to move you from frantic doing to deliberate embodying. Listen to this small exchange you might have with yourself late at night. You say, "I tried every technique and nothing stayed." There is a quieter voice that replies, "You have been asking the future to change the present without allowing your present to accept that future." That quiet voice is the compass inside you. It points not to tactics, but to orientation. Where are you leaning? How does your chest feel when you think about success? What temperature does your breath take when you imagine being loved, free, or secure? When coaches and teachers talk about quantum ideas, they often do so in ways that sound scientific, but stand somewhere between metaphor and hypothesis. For clarity, popular interpretations of experiments like the double slit are used here as metaphorical frames, not as laboratory proof that thought alone collapses reality into your favor. Likewise, findings in neuroplasticity, research suggests that repeated mental patterns change neural wiring, are useful to show that the brain responds to practice, but they do not guarantee an outcome. Use these references as lenses, not levers. Here is the diagnostic most people miss. Your nervous system has memory. It records threat and safety in texture, tone, and posture long after the event that taught it. You may intellectually decide to change, you may make a plan and set a goal, but your body, your autonomic nervous system, keeps telling the world your old story. That story registers in micro-gestures, a clenched jaw, a held breath, a small rounding of the shoulders that reads as tension to the people around you. The field you create with those micro-gestures becomes the signal to which life aligns. Imagine two people at the same table, both promising a new business next year. One sits with a slow breath, relaxed hands, shoulders softened, their voice has room. The other speaks faster, fingers tapping the table, jaw tight. They may read the same script, but the table, the room, and the world respond to a different frequency. Not because the universe is biased toward one and against the other, but because human systems are responsive to the cues we give. Your internal posture sets a frequency that organizes attention, opportunities, and the way you respond to feedback. Breathe with me now. This is a micro practice you can do anywhere in 30 to 60 seconds. Place a hand over your sternum. Notice the pattern of your breath. Don't change it yet, just observe. Then inhale gently to a count that feels natural, soften your jaw, let your shoulders drop like something you've been holding releases. Exhale with a sigh if that helps. Repeat 3 times. Notice a subtle widening behind your eyes. This is not magic, it is a signal shift. When your body sends a different cue, your field shifts accordingly, and the timeline that follows starts to rearrange. A note here about safety. If you are working with histories of trauma, move slowly and seek support. These practices are meant to complement professional care, not replace it.
Pacing is essential. Incremental embodiment is the safer route than sudden intensity. To understand how this reversal operates, picture a compass. Most people angle their compass toward fear. What if I fail? And then take actions that align with fear, which predictably returns more evidence of failure. Flip the compass. Choose the stationary point you want to become. Calibrate your posture, voice, and small daily decisions to that point. The world will start to reflect back opportunities that are congruent with that orientation. Again, this is a practice of alignment, not a guarantee. Results vary. Let's talk about timelines. We think of them as straight lines: goal, action, result. I invite you to see them as landscapes instead: peaks, valleys, currents. When you change your internal altitude, your identity altitude, you can find a path that was invisible before. This is why two people doing roughly the same actions get different outcomes. One acts from the identity of the future, the other acts from the identity of the past. The first moves through the landscape with a different gravity. There's a story I keep returning to because it always clarifies the reversal. Years ago, a woman I worked with, call her Mara, had a dream of opening a small bookstore that doubled as a community space. She spent months making lists, scouting locations, and networking. Nothing stuck. In a coaching conversation, she finally said, "I need to be someone who can run this." We turned to embodiment instead of the plan.
Mara practiced entering the physical state of the person who already ran that bookstore, walking slowly with an open chest, practicing a warm tone when she greeted strangers, carrying a small notebook and inviting recommendations. She did not fake vast wealth or pretend to know everything. She practiced the small, steady cues of ownership. Within months, a landlord called her about a space because a mutual friend remembered the way she carried herself at a local event: calm, steady, available. Coincidence? Maybe. Correlation? The signal she sent had changed. The timeline responded. She then took the necessary external steps: permits, leases, inventory, but those steps landed in a context that matched her identity. I want you to try a short anchor exercise now, so it becomes more than an idea. Stand or sit in a place where you can be steady for 1 minute. Pick a short phrase that carries the future you want. Simple, present tense, like "I am steady" or "I lead with calm." Inhale to a neutral count, say the phrase softly on your exhale while feeling the weight in your feet ground you. Repeat 10 times. Afterward, open your eyes and scan the room. Note what feels different in your chest, your hands, your attention. If nothing changes dramatically, that's okay. Small adjustments compound over time. If you're feeling an uptick in clarity, that's the river beginning to turn. At this point, you might be wondering about evidence beyond anecdote. Here's the tempered explanation. Experiments in psychology and neuroscience show that repeated shifts in attention and posture correlate with changes in behavior and perception. Popular talk of quantum is often a poetic shorthand for how small initial conditions can steer large outcomes in complex systems. Use those images to help you imagine the process, but keep your feet on the practical ground. Repeated, embodied practice rewires habitual responses and opens different possibilities for action. Between explanation and practice, one simple action increases likelihood of follow-through. Anchor the concept in language. If you're willing, type "My future leads, not my past" below. Making it explicit strengthens the neural patterning. Type only if this feels safe for you. When identity drives the timeline, resistance appears differently. It's not usually loud. More often, it's a low hum of old habits that pull you back. The urge to overplan, to seek proof, to wait until conditions are perfect. Those are defense strategies the nervous system learned to keep you safe. Your task is not to shame that part, but to reorient it gently. Invite it to step aside by showing, through small repeated acts, that the world is responding to a new frequency.
Show it evidence, send invitations, accept small risks, honor micro successes. You will face moments where the old identity still shows up because habit has history. Meet those moments with curiosity. Sit with the tightness in your throat. Ask what it wants you to know.
Offer it a slower breath. This is not avoidance, it is integration. The work of embodiment includes befriending resistance and shifting the felt narrative, not annihilating parts of yourself. There is an art to sequencing action in this reversed model. First, calibrate identity through brief embodiment practices. Second, take aligned, incremental steps that feel congruent with that identity. Third, reflect and adjust. Too often people invert the order, doing big external moves before the internal architecture is ready, and then wonder why the moves collapse under stress. Think of internal calibration as building a platform. Once stable, the steps you take are more reliable and result in fewer collapses. Another micro-practice you can use when anxiety tries to hijack your momentum is what I call the compass check. Pause, place your hand on your sternum, and ask, where is my internal compass pointing? Toward fear or toward arrival? If toward fear, breathe, soften, and name one tiny step that is consistent with arrival. Do that step within 24 hours. Small acts build gravitational pull. This approach does not ask you to stop acting. It asks you to change the posture of your action. You will still write emails, make calls, and create offerings. The shift is that those actions are taken from an identity that already inhabits the future you want, which changes the tone, timing, and trajectory of your moves. There is a deeper ethical note here worth naming. Because these practices influence perception and behavior, use them with care. If you are navigating interpersonal dynamics, relationships, employment, caretaking, ensure that your embodiment serves healthy outcomes for all parties. Do not weaponize subtle influence to manipulate. Instead, use it to clarify and align your life with values that matter. As you practice, pay attention to subtle synchronies, phone calls that land at the right time, conversations that hint at opportunity, shifts in confidence that make follow-through easier. Treat these as feedback, not proof of destiny. Celebrate them as evidence that small frequency shifts create openings. Keep a journal of these moments. It will remind you that the world is responsive when you consistently broadcast a different signal. When the body softens, the current begins to reverse. When the body softens, the current begins to reverse. That softening is not a surrender to passivity, but a recalibration of force. Energy moves from clenching and defending to tending and inviting. You will notice it in small ways first. A steadier breath before an email, a pause that prevents an automatic yes, the clarity to choose one next step instead of catastrophizing 100. Those micro-shifts matter because they change the meaning you assign to events. Where you once read friction as failure, you begin to see it as feedback. Make space, then, for observations that are neither celebratory nor punitive. Keep a log that honors the ambiguity. What happened, what you did, what you felt in your body, and one sentence about what it suggests. Over time, you will trace patterns. You will discover triggers that reliably compress you and practices that reliably unbind you. Treat the log not as a report card, but as a map. Practical scaffolding helps translate felt shifts into actual outcomes. Design 3 kinds of habits: anchoring rituals, activation moves, and consolidation checks. Anchoring rituals are short, repeatable practices that orient you to the identity you intend to inhabit. They take 30 seconds to 3 minutes. Examples: placing your hand on your sternum and breathing until the exhale softens. Saying one sentence, "I am the person who finishes what I begin," aloud. Walking to the window and touching the sill while naming one value you will carry into the day. Do these rituals before work sessions, difficult conversations, or decision points. They recalibrate posture and attention. Activation moves are the smallest, credible actions that move a project forward. If your goal is to write, activation might be opening a document and typing one sentence. If your goal is to expand your network, activation might be sending one concise message. The point is not volume, but verifiability. One small step taken within 24 hours. This builds gravitational pull toward follow-through. Consolidation checks are brief reflections performed after action. Ask, what did I learn? What felt aligned? What destabilized me? These checks are not long therapy sessions. They are neutral data collection that closes the loop between intention and experience. Sequence these three. First anchor, then activate, then consolidate. Repeat daily. The feedback loop is short, and the cadence is mercilessly kind. Regular micro-evidence rewires belief. When resistance intensifies, because it will, treat it like weather rather than a verdict. You can forecast typical patterns. Initial enthusiasm, a dip when novelty wanes, a plateau, and sometimes a relapse into old behavior. Name the phase without moral commentary. If you are in a dip, shorten the activation moves. If you are plateauing, increase the variety of anchors to reignite curiosity. If you relapse, lean into consolidation, not shame. One method that helps when the nervous system insists on certainty is the 20-minute plausibility test. Choose a step that feels slightly within reach, yet uncomfortable enough to matter. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Your only rule is to do something relevant for those 20 minutes. No multitasking allowed. You may begin with fiddly admin or a brainstorming sketch. Often, the first 20 minutes unlocks momentum. Sometimes it simply proves the project needs reframing. Either outcome is useful. You also need external scaffolding because identity shifts occur in social contexts. Our habits are contagious.
Seek one or two people who will mirror the posture you want. Not cheerleaders who deny difficulty, but witnesses who notice and reflect. These relationships should be explicit. A weekly check-in by message, a 30-minute call every fortnight, someone who asks, "What did you do that felt like the future you?" If you cannot find such a person in your immediate circle, consider a small cohort or a coach who understands the embodied approach. Keep the ask precise. A friend who hears the details once a month is less helpful than someone who hears the one-sentence commitment every week. Environmental design reinforces new identity. Adjust 3 things in your environment to make future consistent behavior easier and past consistent behavior harder. For example, remove the login friction to your writing tool. Put a shortcut on the desktop. Place the thing you need to create in plain sight, a notebook, an instrument. And make the old default less accessible. Move the streaming app off your primary screen. Small frictions and small easements shift the odds in your favor. Ethics remains central. When your posture changes, your capacity to influence others increases. Ask intermittently, whom does this serve? Whom might it harm? Are you cultivating consent and clarity in your interactions? If your identity shift creates asymmetry in a relationship, say more confidence in negotiations, use that power to broker equitable outcomes, not to leverage dominance. Integrity sustained over time is its own gravity. It draws opportunities that match rather than merely gratify. There will be moments when external events test the new alignment, criticism, a failed pitch, a personal crisis. In those moments, return to the body as neutral ground. The practices above are not charms that prevent adversity. They are resources for responding to it. A simple resilience protocol, 3 intentional breaths, 1 truthful sentence out loud, I did what I could right now, 1 step of care. Call someone, make a short list of options, rest. These actions compress overwhelm into manageable units and preserve agency. Measure progress differently. Traditional metrics privilege output. Embodied practice values input and experience as well. Track 3 numbers each week. 1 output metric, pages written, meetings held, 1 process metric, days you did the anchor ritual, and 1 felt metric. On a scale of 1 to 10, how coherent did you feel with your chosen identity? The felt metric is often the earliest indicator of durable change. Celebrate improvements in coherence even when outputs wobble. Language matters. The sentences you practice will define the architecture of change. Replace conditional phrases, "I'll start when," or "I would if," with present tense commitments that are bounded and observable. This week, I will send 3 proposals, not I will become a person who sends proposals.
The identity claim is implicit in repeated present tense actions. Keep the public language parsimonious and private language generous. You may write a private affidavit to yourself, 1 paragraph stating who you intend to be and why it matters. Read it before anchors. Let me offer 2 brief sketches of how this can play out. Both are small and intentionally bland because the point is the mundane machinery. Case A. A product designer who had the habit of waiting for perfect requirements began a 30-second anchor ritual before design sessions, placing palms on the desk and saying, "I design assuming learning." She then committed to the 20-minute plausibility test twice weekly. Within 6 weeks, she moved from speculative prototypes to running 2 micro-tests per month. Her team noticed the cadence. The organization allowed more rapid iteration. The designer's identity as a learner dissipated the paralysis of perfection. Case B. A caregiver who felt defined by duty practiced the compass check before each household conversation. When fear pointed inward, she named 1 arrival step, calling a support service or asking a sibling for help. The activation moves were tiny but consistent. Her felt coherence increased, and over months she renegotiated responsibilities rather than accumulating resentment alone. Both stories, if you call them that, are not miraculous. They are examples of steady embodied recalibration producing different outcomes. Notice the commonalities: short rituals, inexpensive activation, accountability, and values-grounded ethics. Expect plateaus. Habituation works both ways. The practices that rewired you once can become rote. Refresh your anchors by changing modality. If you used breath anchors, add a movement-based anchor, like a 2-minute walk. If you relied on solitude, include a brief conversational ritual with a trusted witness. Periodize your practice. Intensive focus for a month, maintenance for a month, so novelty and discipline alternate. Integrate rest as an essential practice. Rest is not the absence of productivity, but the condition that allows learning to consolidate. Schedule deliberate rest that has a clear boundary. An hour of walking without screens. A day where you decline requests. An evening that begins with a ritual of closing the workspace. Boundaries teach your nervous system that safety exists outside constant striving. Finally, cultivate curiosity about identity itself. We tend to believe identity is a single immutable thing. Instead, treat it as a repertoire you can expand. Try on small variations. What does being someone who chooses clarity feel like at breakfast, at a meeting, when answering email? These experiments are lightweight and informative. Keep them reversible. Try them as if they were outfits. If one doesn't fit, you do not fail, you learn what doesn't serve. If you want a concrete starting sequence for the week ahead, try this 4-day mini protocol. Day 1. Anchor initiation. Choose a 30-second ritual, perform it 3 times, and log the felt score. Day 2. Activation. Do 1 20-minute plausibility test on a priority project, consolidate for 5 minutes afterward. Day 3. Witnessing. Share a 1-sentence commitment with a designated witness and schedule a brief check-in. Day 4. Reflection. Review the log, note 1 pattern, and adjust an anchor or activation move for the next cycle. Repeat and adapt. The process honors smallness precisely because smallness scales. Remember that true reversal of current is not a single event, but a slow rewriting of the map your nervous system uses to navigate risk and reward. It asks for patience, curiosity, and ethical attention to how your changes touch others. Keep the ritual simple, the actions verifiable, and the reflections generous. Over time, the body's softened posture will not just change how you move, it will change what moves toward you. When the current has shifted enough that the outer world begins to respond differently, do not conclude that the inner work is done. The work becomes subtler,
maintaining coherence under new stress, negotiating relationships that now treat you differently, and stewarding influence. Continue the practices. Keep the log, invite witnesses, make room for rest. The reversal is durable when it rests less on motivation and more on structure, those small architectures of ritual, action, reflection, and ethical accountability that make a future you trustable. If you are ready, choose one anchor now and commit to it for the rest of the day. Try it. Notice the first change it brings to your breathing, your posture, or the tone of one small interaction. Then do one thing within the next 24 hours that proves the anchor true in the world. You are not rewriting destiny in a single stroke. You are shifting a current by changing the way you align to it, moment by moment, breath by breath, step by step. The river does not flip overnight, but with enough consistent small tides, it does begin to flow toward where you intend to arrive. Expect setbacks. They are information, not indictments. When a week slips or a ritual fades, resist the temptation to moralize. Inspect. What changed in context, energy, or support? Treat the lapse as a data point for the log. Note time, mood, triggers, and small wins you still carried. Repair quickly. Shorten the anchor, re-establish accountability, and celebrate the restart without drama. As you scale, protect simplicity. Add practices only one is steady. Beware of virtue signaling schedules. Doing rituals to look disciplined while abandoning the felt work erodes trust in yourself. Invite one person into the architecture, a witness who asks only, "What did you try?" and "What will you try next?" Their questions create social gravity without performance pressure.
Finally, orient toward meaning. Let each micro-movement answer a question bigger than productivity. Who do I want to be for others? When actions link to service, curiosity, or care, coherence deepens and endurance follows. Tonight, choose one tiny anchor and do it twice before sleep. Notice what changes by morning.